Across the world, from Turkey to Peru, from Japan to the deserts of Arabia, rise ancient monuments that, by all logic, shouldn't exist. Stones the size of houses carved with impossible precision. Temples built thousands of years before history says civilization began. And everywhere, legends speak of a great flood that wiped it all away. Were these ruins the final messages of a forgotten world, or clues that history as we know it is incomplete? Tell us in the comments. Are these just myths or proof of something far greater we've lost? Göbekli Tepe. In the rolling plains of southeastern Turkey, a series of ancient hilltop sites guard one of humanity's oldest secrets. The most famous is Göbekli Tepe, a Neolithic complex so ancient that it predates Stonehenge by over 6,000 years. Here, massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some towering 5.5 meters, 18 feet, high and weighing up to 50 tons, stand arranged in stone circles atop a windy plateau. Carved on their broad faces are enigmatic reliefs of lions, snakes, foxes, and vultures, frozen in stone yet brimming with life. Archaeologists believe these monolithic rings were constructed around 9,600 to 9,000 BCE, at the end of the last ice age, making Göbekli Tepe the world's oldest known temple complex. Its age and scale are astonishing, a creation of prehistoric hunter-gatherers who hadn't yet invented writing, metal tools, or the wheel. Yet somehow, these early people quarried and transported pillars the size of buses and raised them upright within carefully engineered enclosures. The sheer effort required, hundreds of workers carving and hauling stone, defies our expectations of Ice Age society. Göbekli Tepe's builders clearly possessed organization and skill beyond what we once imagined of that era. The site's purpose remains shrouded in mystery. No evidence of dwellings exists, so researchers suspect it was a sacred sanctuary or ritual center rather than a settlement. The pillars are decorated with fierce animals and abstract symbols, perhaps icons of myths or spirit guardians. Could this have been humanity's first temple, where long-forgotten ceremonies were performed under the stars? We can only wonder what beliefs brought people together on this lonely hill to carve giants from bedrock. Adding to the enigma, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried under tons of earth and rubble around 8,000 BCE, an intentional act that preserved it for posterity. Why did its builders carefully entomb their own sacred structures? Some speculate it was to protect the site, perhaps from an approaching threat, or to ritually close it at the end of an era. In any case, this puzzling act kept the stone circles remarkably well preserved for modern excavators. Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Scattered across the region are at least a dozen similar tepe sites, hilltop sanctuaries with T-shaped pillars, suggesting a whole culture of megalith builders in prehistoric Anatolia. One such site is Karahan Tepe, discovered in the 1990s about 40 kilometers away. At Karahan Tepe, archaeologists have unearthed pillars and statues contemporaneous with Göbekli Tepe, including eerie life-size stone heads emerging from the earth. These sister sites, collectively called Taş Tepeler, or Stone Hills, indicate that an advanced society thrived here over 11,000 years ago. They worked on a monumental scale, carving temples and monoliths long before the dawn of civilization, as traditionally defined. The existence of multiple Göbekli Tepe-style sanctuaries raises an intriguing possibility. Were these hilltop temples nodes of a widespread Neolithic religion, or a coordinated culture sharing a common vision? The more we learn, the more astonishing it becomes. How did people so ancient achieve such feats of engineering and art? With simple flint tools and stone hammers, they sculpted dozens of pillars weighing many tons, stood them upright, and aligned them in circles, perhaps according to geometric plans. Recent studies suggest the layout of Göbekli Tepe's enclosures was not random. The builders used geometry, possibly ropes and stakes, to achieve precise alignments and symmetrical arrangements. This hints that they had knowledge of planning and design far more advanced than expected for their era. It is a humbling reminder that our distant ancestors were far more sophisticated than once assumed. The mysteries surrounding Göbekli Tepe are profound. Who were the people that built these sanctuaries? They left no known name or writing, only stones. What rituals took place amid these pillars? And why, after millennia, did they bury their great handiwork? Local traditions in this part of Turkey offer tantalizing hints. There are legends of ancient sages or giants with extraordinary skill who taught humanity agriculture, astronomy, and architecture, then vanished after a great catastrophe. Such folklore, while not literal, echoes similar myths worldwide of a lost golden age when advanced knowledge was widespread. It fuels speculation that the builders of Göbekli Tepe might have been part of a larger story, perhaps one interrupted by a global event remembered as a flood or cosmic disaster. After exploring Göbekli Tepe and its sister sites, one thing becomes clear. There is so much we don't know about this early chapter of civilization. This site and others like it demand that we reconsider the timeline of human social organization and spiritual life. We stand in awe of their achievements and puzzle over their motives. Göbekli Tepe and the Taş Tepeler culture remind us that our planet holds countless stories from forgotten civilizations. Each T-shaped pillar and carved lion is a message from a remote past, one we are still struggling to decipher. Balbek Megaliths. High in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, amid the ruins of Roman Heliopolis, Baalbek, lie megalithic stones so massive that they boggle the mind. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek sits on a platform like no other. In its foundation wall, 3 colossal blocks called the Trilithon are fitted together, each about 19 meters long, 4.2 meters high, and 3.6 meters thick. These limestone slabs weigh an estimated 750 to 800 tons each. To put that in perspective, each stone is as heavy as 2 fully loaded Boeing 747 airplanes. Yet somehow, ancient builders raised them 7 meters above ground and set them atop a layer of smaller stones, so precisely joined that not even a knife blade can fit between them. Seeing the Trilithon blocks in person, one can't help but feel a mix of astonishment and disbelief. How on earth did ancient people manage this feat? And that's not all. In the nearby quarry, even larger megaliths were carved but never moved. One partially cut block, nicknamed the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, is about 20 meters long and weighs roughly 1,000 tons. Another giant, called the Stone of the South, weighs an estimated 1,242 tons. An even newer find, humorously dubbed the Forgotten Stone, may weigh around 1,650 tons, the weight of 4 jumbo jets. These rank among the largest work stones in human history. They remain in the quarry as if abandoned mid-project, perhaps because they proved too heavy to move. The sight of the pregnant woman's stone, lying attached to bedrock with one side freed, sparks the imagination. It's as if a giant stonecutter had nearly finished extracting it, then left it for us as a permanent question mark. The mystery of Baalbek's megaliths has captivated visitors for centuries. How were blocks of 800 plus tons transported from quarry to temple, a distance of nearly a kilometer, and lifted into place? The Roman engineers of the 1st century AD, who built the Grand Temple of Jupiter, certainly moved and positioned many heavy stones, using cranes, capstans, ropes, and human or animal muscle. The quarry is slightly uphill from the temple platform, so it's likely the ancients leveraged gravity, building earthen ramps to slide the stones down. Experiments suggest that with enough manpower, say several hundred workers, and a system of rollers and pulleys, even stones of hundreds of tons can be inched along. Still, the Trilithon's size pushes the limits of known techniques. The Romans left detailed records of moving much smaller obelisks. Yet, about Baalbek, they are strangely silent. It has led some to speculate that the Trilithon blocks predate the Romans. Perhaps they are remnants of an earlier, much older sacred platform that the Romans simply built upon. Local legends certainly feed that idea. A medieval Arab name for Baalbek was Trilithon itself, indicating the wonder those stones evoked. One story claims the Stone of the Pregnant Woman got its name because a pregnant jinn, a supernatural being, cut and moved it for Baalbek's builders. Another tells of a clever woman who, while pregnant, convinced villagers she could reveal how to move the great stone if they fed her until she gave birth. Needless to say, she never delivered the secret. Such tales, while fanciful, underline a key point. Even in folklore, the Balbek megaliths were deemed beyond ordinary human skill. In Lebanese village tradition, people sometimes attributed the whole platform to Cain, son of Adam, or to giants from before the flood. The very term Balbek stones has become synonymous with impossibly large building blocks. Standing among the ruins of Balbek today, one experiences a sense of awe that borders on disbelief. Around you rise elegant Corinthian columns and Roman courtyards, but your eye keeps returning to those gargantuan stones at the base. They exude an aura of permanence. Archaeologists have determined that the trilithon blocks were indeed quarried just a few hundred meters away. The quarry's higher elevation meant the stones could be dragged along a gradual downhill slope to the temple site without needing to be lifted, a small mercy. Even so, coordinating the movement of an 800-ton monolith would have required incredible human organization and ingenuity. Imagine thousands of workers hauling on ropes and wooden rollers, inching the stone forward over days, shouting and sweating in unison. Then consider the finesse required to place these blocks atop a wall 7 meters high. The builders likely erected an earthen ramp, a massive inclined plane, to slide the blocks up to the desired height, then remove the soil to reveal the platform. The effort and planning involved are almost inconceivable. The purpose behind using stones so enormous remains puzzling. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek was certainly meant to impress. It was one of the largest religious complexes of the Roman Empire. Perhaps the Roman engineers used the existing Cyclopean stones as a ready-made foundation and a propaganda tool, demonstrating continuity with a primeval power. Or maybe those blocks truly are remnants of a much older structure, and the Romans simply couldn't move them, and thus incorporated them. If an earlier civilization placed those blocks, it pushes our timeline back into prehistory and into the realm of myth. Could Baalbek have been a high place in the distant past, built by an unknown people with skills beyond what we credit to Iron Age or Bronze Age cultures? It's an idea mostly argued by fringe theorists and not backed by direct evidence. Yet the silence of the historical record on these stones leaves room for wonder. In the absence of clear answers, Baalbek's megaliths leave us an open-ended enigma. They stand as a testament to human boldness and perhaps to human hubris. Blocks so large that even our modern machines would strain to lift them. Modern engineers scratch their heads. Our best mobile cranes today max out around 1,200 tons, and here we have ancient stones in that class. Some adventurous souls propose exotic theories, from forgotten high-tech devices to extraterrestrial help, but no evidence supports these notions. Instead, Baalbek likely teaches us that ancient people were extremely resourceful and willing to attempt the seemingly impossible. The sun sets behind the Lebanon mountains and bathes the trilithon in golden light. One can almost see robed priests and engineers of long ago gazing with pride and perhaps relief at their completed platform. Thousands of years later, we are still gazing, spellbound. Baalbek stones challenge us to comprehend the feats of our ancestors, and to acknowledge that there are chapters in our past that we have yet to fully understand. Easter Island statues, Rapa Nui. Far out in the Pacific Ocean, on a speck of land isolated by thousands of kilometers of water, mysterious giants stand guard. These are the Moai of Rapa Nui, Easter Island. Nearly 1,000 monumental statues carved by the indigenous Rapa Nui people between the 11th and 17th centuries AD. The Moai are iconic, oversized heads with heavy brows and solemn, pouting lips. Some statues wearing cylindrical top-knots of red scoria. The tallest Moai ever erected, called Paro, was almost 10 meters, 33 feet, high and weighed about 82 tons. Another at Ahu Tongariki, though slightly shorter, was even heavier at 86 tons. To this day, these monoliths captivate the world's imagination. How did a small, isolated population with limited resources carve and transport such mammoth figures? The Moai were hewn from the volcanic tuff of Rano Raraku, a crater which served as the main quarry. In that quarry, nearly half of all Moai remain in various stages of completion, as if the carvers suddenly downed tools and left. We see Moai partly detached from bedrock and dozens standing or lying on the crater slopes. The 400-plus Moai that were finished were painstakingly transported from the quarry to ceremonial platforms, called Ahu, around the island's perimeter. Moving them was a prodigious challenge. The routes traversed rugged terrain and up and down hills for many kilometers. Astonishingly, the Rapa Nui managed it without wheels, large animals, or metal. The most widely accepted theory is that they used a combination of log rollers, sledges, and ropes, which likely contributed to heavy deforestation of the island. Trees were cut for log rollers or to clear paths. However, Rapa Nui oral tradition offers a different explanation. According to legend, the Moai walked to their locations. In these legends, the powerful ancestral chief or priests used mana, spiritual power, to command the statues to move. In recent years, researchers have demonstrated how a small team with ropes can indeed walk a replica Moai. By tying ropes around it and rhythmically swiveling it left and right, they can inch a standing statue forward in a shuffling gait. This sheds light on how the real Moai might have been transported, not lying horizontally on rollers, but upright, rocking side to side, walking to their ahu. It's a rare case where a seemingly implausible indigenous story turned out to align with a plausible technique. One can imagine the pride and relief of the statue movers when a massive Moai finally walked to its platform and was secured upright, gazing inland over their clan's territory. Despite such insights, mysteries abound on Easter Island. Why did the Rapa Nui pour so much of their limited resources into carving bigger and bigger statues for centuries? The leading theory is that the Moai, which likely represent deified ancestors, were part of an ancestor worship cult. Each clan competed to honor its forebears, believing the Moai's spiritual power safeguarded their people, lands, and fishing waters. This competition may have spurred the Moai boom, driving ever larger statues. But in doing so, the islanders overexploited their environment. The haul roads required clearing forests for sledges or rope, and making rollers or levers from wood. Pollen records show that the once forested island lost most of its trees by around 1400 AD. The soils eroded without tree cover. As resources dwindled, clan rivalries likely intensified. By the time the first European arrived, 1722, the society was in decline. The Moai, which had all been standing erect when Jacob Roggeveen's Dutch expedition first saw them, were almost all found toppled by the 19th century. It's thought that in the late 1700s, after devastating internecine wars, the islanders intentionally pulled down their rivals' statues, breaking the divine protection they embodied. Rapa Nui folklore speaks of a turbulent past. One legend recounts a conflict between the long ears and short ears, possibly two ethnic or social groups, culminating in a great battle and a massive ditch where the vanquished were burned, a tale that some link to the scorched statues and ashes found at certain sites, suggesting a violent end to the Moai era. Other stories simply say that once the Moai all had eyes, inlaid with coral and obsidian, and watched over the land, but when their eyes were gouged out and they were cast down, the land fell into disarray. Today, many Moai have been re-erected, especially in major sites like Ahu Tongariki and Ahu Tahai, as part of restoration projects, and they stare with blank eye sockets over a landscape that is green with grass but empty of the giant palms that once grew there. They remain silent sentinels, keeping their secrets. We know how the Moai were carved, with basalt toki chisels, and we are close to understanding how they were moved. But why this tradition became the central focus of Rapa Nui culture, why they felt compelled to devote so much effort to carving 10-meter stone humans, remains a matter of conjecture and wonder. Standing before a line of Moai at Ahu Tongariki as the sun rises over the Pacific, one can't help but feel the eerie majesty of these statues. They seem to speak to something deep in the human spirit, the drive to create and honor, and perhaps a warning about pushing an ecosystem and a society beyond its limits. Easter Island statues remind us that even on the remotest speck of land, humans achieved wonders, but that great achievements do not guarantee survival. They stand as both monuments to human ingenuity and, potentially, as warnings of what happens when we overreach and upset the balance with nature. Longyu Caves. Deep under the gentle hills of Zhejiang province in China lies a man-made wonder that sat unknown and undisturbed for over 2 millennia. The Longyu Caves are a sprawling complex of at least 24 vast underground chambers, hand-carved directly into solid sandstone. They were discovered only in 1992, when a curious villager wondered why a local, bottomless pond never dried up, and convinced his neighbors to help pump the water out. To everyone's astonishment, the pond was artificial, the flooded entrance to an ancient, human-carved cavern. Soon, others were drained, revealing a network of huge underground halls supported by rock pillars. Each cavern descends as much as 30 meters, 100 feet, below ground, and covers thousands of square meters with ceilings up to 10 meters high. In total, an estimated 1 million cubic meters of rock was excavated to create these chambers. Inside the Longyu Caves, the walls and ceilings are uniformly finished with vertical chisel marks, in a pattern of parallel strokes that cover every surface like a decorative texture. This is no natural cave. It is as if the entire interior was scratched by giant combs. The effect is both mesmerizing and baffling. Who carved these immense grottos, and why? Remarkably, no historical record of their construction or even their existence has been found. The caves have been tentatively dated to around the 3rd to 2nd century BCE, the Qin or Early Han Dynasty, based on some pottery found and tool marks analysis. If that is accurate, it means they were made around 2,200 years ago, roughly contemporaneous with the Terracotta Army and the initial Great Wall, except those projects are well documented, and the Longyu Caves are not mentioned in any known texts. The absence of historical mention is as puzzling as the caves themselves. Ancient China kept extensive chronicles and bureaucratic records. It's hard to imagine that a massive undertaking, essentially an underground Qin Shi Huang's tomb without the tomb, could have been done without attracting imperial attention or scribal note. Yet no text speaks of an emperor or magistrate ordering thousands of workers to carve out mountain-sized volumes of sandstone. Also perplexing is that the caves appear completely empty. When drained, no significant artifacts were found. No tools left behind, no relief. Carvings on the walls, no remnants of continuing usage. It's as if the people who made them cleaned up and moved on, and eventually water seeped in to hide their work for ages. So, what were they for? Theories abound. One suggestion is that they were an elaborate form of underground storage or granary. Large, cool spaces to stockpile grain for the state in case of war or famine. If true, they would represent a mind-boggling investment for a granary, far exceeding normal grain pit sizes, and we might expect remnants of stored goods or inscriptions about inventory, which we don't have. Another idea is that they were quarries. That is, the ancients dug out usable stone, and these caverns are just the leftover voids. Yet the interior chisel marks suggest a careful, even artistic finish, not the rough haphazardness typical of quarries. Plus, the caves are very regular in shape, some almost like halls with flat floors, vertical walls, and arched ceilings, quite elaborate for just getting building stone. Others speculate the caves had a ceremonial purpose, perhaps a gigantic underground sanctuary or a hidden palace for an emperor that never got recorded. It's even been proposed they were an ancient attempt at an underground city to shelter from some danger, or that they were flooded intentionally to create a fish hatchery, though the scale seems overkill for breeding fish. Without records, we're left with physical clues. The consistency of the chisel patterns suggests the work was highly organized. You can see that multiple teams worked on different sections of a wall, but at a uniform angle and spacing of strokes, implying a coordinated plan and standard training. The pillars left in place are evenly distributed, showing understanding of structural support. The caves do not connect to each other, but lie side by side, with mere thin walls of stone between some. Yet none of the walls were accidentally breached, which implies detailed knowledge of each other's positioning. In short, whoever built them had a master blueprint and communicated across teams to ensure no cave broke into another. This level of planning hints at either a central authority or a strong common engineering culture behind the project. Local folklore was caught by surprise. Before 1992, the villagers just thought these were very deep natural ponds. They had a superstition that the ponds were bottomless and possibly home to spirits, because attempts to measure their depth always ran out of rope. We now know that was because the rope weight likely drifted, giving the illusion of depth. The fact that these caves stayed filled with water for 2 millennia suggests excellent workmanship, minimal leakage. But intriguing is the question of where all the excavated rock went. Nearly 1 million cubic meters of sandstone was removed, yet no huge spoil heaps have been identified nearby. Did they use it to build something? Fortifications? Roads? Now eroded or hidden? Was it carried off by a river that has since changed course? The missing debris is its own riddle. Inside the caverns, the conditions are cool and quiet. Some caves have small side niches, and what might be carved stairs or benches. Interestingly, one grotto contains a relief carving of a door on a wall, a false door that goes nowhere, purely decorative. That raises more questions. It lends a ceremonial or symbolic air, as if these spaces might have been intended to imitate an imperial palace or temple layout, complete with doorways, halls, and pillars, except underground and hidden. If so, what deity or power was it meant for? No evidence of worship, altars, idols, inscriptions has been found in Longyu. This emptiness invites alternative theories. A few enthusiasts have suggested that perhaps the caves were made with some lost technology, the incredibly smooth surfaces and uniform marks leading to fanciful ideas of giant stone-cutting machines, or even alien involvement. There is no scientific support for such claims. The tool marks strongly indicate hand chiseling, just at a massive scale. But the sheer uniqueness of Longyu Caves means conventional explanations feel unsatisfying, so imaginations run wild. Today, several of the Longyu Caves are open to the public, with walkways and lighting installed, yet many are still flooded or only partially explored. The government has designated them a protected heritage site. As visitors descend into one cavern, they often feel a hush. The outside world's noise falls away, and only the rhythmic echo of dripping water is heard. Shining a flashlight on the ribbed walls accentuates the play of light and shadow on the carved lines. It is mesmerizing and a bit eerie. One can't help but feel the presence of the people who carved these expanses by lamplight over 2,000 years ago. What drove them to undertake such a superhuman task? In the end, the Longyu Caves remain an open-ended enigma. They force us to ask, how much do we really know about ancient China? Could there have been significant achievements that simply didn't make it into official history? Until some inscription or record comes to light, we have to piece together the story from circumstantial evidence. For now, the Longyu Caves stand silently, monumental underground halls that defy complete explanation, inviting us to step away from easy assumptions and recognize that even in a land of well-recorded dynasties, deep mysteries can still lie below our feet. Ancient walls of South America. High in the Andes of Peru, around the Inca capital of Cusco and the Sacred Valley, stretch stone walls so masterfully constructed that they puzzle engineers to this day. Inca fortresses and temples like Sacsayhuaman, overlooking Cusco, Ollantaytambo, and others feature megalithic walls made of huge polygonal blocks, fitted together with astonishing precision. These are not modest stones. Many are multi-ton boulders, some standing over 4 meters tall and weighing 100 tons or more. Yet they join so perfectly that not even a sheet of paper can slide between them. They were all dry laid, no mortar, using an ingenious jigsaw puzzle method. After centuries of earthquakes, the Inca walls still stand, the blocks dancing during tremors and settling back in place, while many later colonial masonry buildings collapsed. Walking along Cusco's famous 12-angle stone, a cut and polished andesite block with 12 perfectly matched edges, you gain an appreciation for the skill involved. Each stone had to be individually shaped to interlock with its neighbors. The Inca, according to their own lore, inherited much of this stonework from earlier peoples. For instance, they ascribed some Cusco walls to the Giants, or a pre-Inca race. Even the Spanish chroniclers, encountering structures like Sacsayhuaman's colossal zigzag ramparts, were incredulous. One early Spaniard wrote that the devil must have had a hand in building it, because he couldn't conceive of humans moving such stones. Some blocks at Sacsayhuaman are estimated at 120 to 200 tons, larger than nearly any used in the Old World. Yet here they were, placed atop a hill without benefit of wheels or draft animals. modern engineers continue to study these walls, finding them an elegant solution to seismic stability and heavy transport, yet still not fully explaining the precise methods the Inca or their predecessors used. How did the Andeans do it? The Inca had only bronze tools for carving and no pulley systems as far as we know. Archaeologists surmise that many of the stones were pried from rock falls or quarried and then dragged with ropes up earthen ramps. At Sacsayhuaman, you can still see the ramp-like terraces they likely built to maneuver blocks into place. They probably used vine ropes, wooden levers, and small armies of laborers. A feat of organization and muscle power across decades. To achieve the perfect fits, they could have patiently abraded the stones by grinding them with sand and smaller rocks until each block sat snug against the next. It's also been suggested that they repeatedly lowered and raised the stones, chipping away high points and using red ochre as a primitive blueprint die to mark contact points, a painstaking trial and error method. The result was walls of uncanny solidity. There's a fringe theory that the Inca might have had a secret plant-based chemical to soften stone, so that it could be molded like clay, based on some jungle legends, but no evidence of such an alchemical marvel has been found. We have to credit good old human craftsmanship. Beyond their technical prowess, these walls showcase the Inca and pre-Inca philosophy. They saw the natural world as alive. Stones were considered the bones of Pachamama, Mother Earth. By fitting stones together in organic curves and multiple angles, they made walls that seemed to grow naturally from the ground, a harmony of nature and culture. The interlocking polygonal style also had a practical benefit. It made the structures highly earthquake-resistant. The Andes are seismically active. The Inca learned from prior cultures, like the Tiwanaku in Bolivia, that trapezoidal shapes and leaning walls best survive quakes. So they gave their walls a slight inward tilt and varied the block shapes. Indeed, when a major quake struck Cusco in 1650, modern Spanish buildings tumbled, but many Inca walls remained standing intact. It's a brilliant example of indigenous engineering. Standing before these ancient walls, one cannot help feeling humbled. At Sacsayhuaman, the fortress above Cusco, you face a terrace where giants seem to have played with stone like a child's blocks. Each boulder looms above you, yet they fit like puzzle pieces. In Ollantaytambo's Temple of the Sun, 6 huge rose-colored monoliths, each approximately 50 tons, stand in a row, perfectly jointed, transported across a river valley from their quarry and up a mountainside to their present site. The mind reels at the logistics. Inca lore says these grand structures were built in a single night by a god, a poetic way to admit we can't imagine how it was done. Even today, our imaginings sometimes stray to the extraordinary. Was there lost knowledge here? Anti-gravity techniques? Help from giants, as legend suggests? While such notions aren't necessary, the Inca likely achieved their feats with known methods and boundless determination. The sense of wonder remains. These cyclopean walls invite us not just to admire their durability, but the durability of human ingenuity. The know-how behind them was passed down through generations, from pre-Inca civilizations to the Inca, and represents a continuity of knowledge. As we run our fingers along the cool, smooth join between 2 Cusco stones, we touch a legacy of skill. The walls of the Andes remind us that sometimes the greatest puzzles of the past are not about how something fell apart, but about how it still stands. They are patient teachers in stone, encouraging us to keep seeking answers. And indeed, modern architects study Inca techniques for insights into earthquake-proof construction to this day. Oyeran at Abidos. Travel now to Abidos, one of ancient Egypt's most sacred cities, tucked behind the painted columns of the Temple of Seti. The first is something very different. The Oyeran, a subterranean stone structure so mysterious that it has been called an Egyptian Stonehenge. The Oyeran consists of a massive rectangular hall set deep in the ground, constructed of monolithic granite blocks. Entered via a long descending tunnel, the hall features 10 huge granite pillars, in pairs, forming a central corridor, and was once roofed by enormous granite beams. These blocks weigh on the order of 40 to 60 tons each. Today, many roof slabs have fallen into the hall or are missing, and groundwater partially floods the floor, so the pillars stand in gray pools of water. Around the central hall are outer chambers and an enclosing wall of rough limestone blocks. Sitdebai built his mortuary temple at Abidos around 1300 BCE. According to mainstream archaeology, the Osirian was built as part of his temple complex, essentially as a symbolic tomb for Osiris, the god of the underworld, whom Seti particularly revered. Indeed, the name Osirian reflects it was dedicated to Osiris. It is aligned with Seti's temple, but extends far behind it. Yet what strikes many observers is how unlike Seti's temple, the Osirian is in style. Seti's above-ground halls are covered in exquisite hieroglyphs and art. The Osirian's granite surfaces are bare, huge, and heavy, reminiscent of the megalithic style of Egypt's much older Old Kingdom, like the Valley Temple of Khafre at Giza. Furthermore, the Osirian sits about 15 meters lower than Seti's temple. Its floor is at least 7 to 8 meters below the water table today. Building such a structure at the water table would have been unusual in New Kingdom times. These puzzles have led some to suggest that the Osirian is far older than Seti's temple, perhaps an ancient Middle Kingdom, or even pre-dynastic structure that Seti discovered and incorporated. Seti did decorate a tunnel leading to the Osirian with some inscriptions and star ceilings, but notably, he left the Osirian hall itself uninscribed, almost as if he, too, treated it as a sanctified relic of the past. Most Egyptologists, however, argue that the Osirian's archaic style was deliberate. New Kingdom pharaohs sometimes emulated the past to invoke old power. Seti, who was steeped in reverence for antiquity, might have ordered his architects to build the Osirian to resemble the primeval mound of Egyptian creation myths, a stark, ancient-looking place symbolically below the waters of chaos. The water surrounding the central island in the Osirian certainly fits that symbolism. In Egyptian myth, Osiris was often associated with the Niles, water, and the idea of resurrection from a flood. The flooding we see today might not have been present back then. They likely had ways to manage groundwater, but clearly it was intended to be a hidden cavity. Some researchers point out that a few short inscriptions in the Osirian, graffiti of kings from Seti's era and later, prove it was accessible in New Kingdom times, supporting the view it was built then. Others note that certain architectural details, like how pillars are cut, match Ramesside methods. Whatever its true origin, the Osirian exudes an atmosphere of deep antiquity. Descending into it feels like entering a time capsule. You stand on a stone island surrounded by dark water, granite pillars looming in dim light. The walls seem to close out the world of the living above. It's easy to imagine priests performing the mysteries of Osiris here, rituals of death and rebirth, in a literal underworld chamber. The awe one feels is akin to walking into an ancient cave or a dolmen, even though this is carved architecture. The lack of decoration focuses attention on the massive stones themselves and the interplay of shadow and reflection on the water. The enigmatic nature of the Osirian leaves plenty of room for speculation. In the fringes of archaeology, people have even linked it to the legend of Atlantis, or a supposed antediluvian civilization, suggesting its construction is beyond the capability of New Kingdom Egyptians. Such ideas aren't supported by evidence, but the fact that such a starkly different architecture lies behind Seti's ornate temple is genuinely intriguing. It hints that the Egyptians of 3,300 years ago either had a richer architectural repertoire than we thought, capable of scaling up to megalithic masonry when they wanted to, or they were indeed building atop something from long before. The Osirian encourages us to keep an open mind. Even in one of the most studied archaeological sites on Earth, surprises can lurk just out of sight, under the sand and water. As we depart the Osirian, we carry with us the sense that Egypt's story, for all we have learned, still holds secrets, heavy as granite and hidden in the earth, waiting for those who seek them. Dolmen de Soto and Newgrange. Across Neolithic Europe, passage tombs, long stone corridors leading to burial chambers under earthen mounds, reveal a remarkable convergence of ideas. Two outstanding examples are Dolmen de Soto in southwestern Spain and Newgrange in Ireland. Though separated by sea and 2,000 kilometers, these sites share uncanny parallels in design and cosmic purpose. Dolmen de Soto in Huelva Province, Andalusia, is a long passage grave nearly 21 meters in length, consisting of 30-plus upright stone slabs supporting flat capstones and covered by a circular earth mound about 75 meters across. It was built around 3000 to 2500 BCE, roughly contemporaneous with Stonehenge. Inside, the walls of the passage and main chamber bear engravings chiseled into the slate and sandstone pillars, schematic human figures with rays, perhaps deities or shamanic figures, curving lines, cup marks, and axe-like shapes. These carvings give a rare glimpse at the art and symbolism of Iberia's late Stone Age people. But Dolmen de Soto's most dramatic feature is its celestial alignment. At dawn on the spring and autumn equinoxes, around March 21st and September 21st, the rising sun's rays shoot through the east-facing entrance and illuminate the entire passage and chamber for a brief few minutes. The effect today is breathtaking. To Neolithic people, it must have felt profoundly meaningful, perhaps signifying the triumph of light over darkness, or offering a moment for the spirits of the deceased to commune with the living in the sun's presence. Archaeologists found skeletal remains of several individuals in the chamber, buried in fetal position, along with grave goods like flint knives, pottery, and beads. Clearly, Dolmen de Soto was a sacred burial site, used over multiple generations. The solar alignment suggests it was more than a tomb. It was a kind of cosmic clock and ceremonial center, where on special days the community gathered at sunrise to witness the miracle of the sun penetrating the realm of the dead. Far to the north, in the Boyne Valley of Ireland, Newgrange, Brú na Boyne, offers a parallel story. Built around 3200 BCE, making it about 500 years older than the Giza pyramids, Newgrange is a large mound, 85 meters in diameter, 12 meters high, constructed of stone and earth with a retaining wall of gleaming white quartz and granite cobbles, restored on the front. Around its base, 97 curbstones form a ring, many of them richly carved with megalithic art. Spirals, lozenges, zigzags, and circles. Through one curbstone, the entrance stone, decorated with the famous triple spiral, runs a 19-meter-long passage that leads to a central cruciform chamber with a high corbelled vault. This inner chamber has 3 side recesses, each holding a large basin stone where cremated remains or offerings were placed. The sophistication of the construction is mind-boggling. The corbelled roof has remained effectively waterproof for over 5,000 years. But Newgrange's most famous feature is its alignment to the winter solstice. Above the doorway, the builders included a roof box opening. At dawn on the shortest days of the year, around December 21st, the rising sun shoots a beam of light through this slit, which travels slowly down the passage floor and then fans out, illuminating the central chamber in golden light. The illumination lasts about 14 minutes, gradually creeping from darkness to brilliance and then fading. Modern visitors, selected by lottery, describe it as eerie and deeply moving, standing in the ancient tomb as it fills with the year's first light, as Neolithic people did 5,000 years ago. Newgrange, like Dolmen de Soto, was used for burials. Remains of perhaps 5 individuals were found, cremated, along with grave goods like bone pins and beads. But clearly it too was more than a tomb. It was a ceremonial monument tied to the solar calendar, likely the focal point for winter solstice celebrations that heralded the return of the sun and looking forward to spring's renewal. Interestingly, Newgrange is part of a broader necropolis. Nearby Noth and Douth are similar passage mound tombs. Noth even has multiple passages, aligned to equinox sunrises and sunsets, and there are smaller mounds and henges in the area. This suggests a centralized Neolithic culture in the Boyne Valley that invested heavily in ritual architecture. Both sites show that Neolithic farmers and herders, often imagined as primitive, actually had a very sophisticated understanding of their world. They planned large-scale constructions, mobilized labor forces, and accurately tracked celestial events. One striking commonality is the art. The spiral motifs carved on Newgrange's stones are strongly reminiscent of the circular engravings in Dolmen de Soto and other Iberian tombs. While direct connection is doubtful, Atlantic Europe in that era did have maritime trade, but these cultures were separated by great distance. It does hint at a shared symbolic language of the Neolithic that spread widely, or at least a shared impulse to depict certain abstract forms, perhaps, relating to the sun, cycles, or shamanic visions. Irish mythology later wove Newgrange into its tapestry of gods and heroes. It was said to be the home of Engus, the son of the chief god Dagda. In legend, Engus tricked his father into giving him Newgrange by asking to reside there for a day and a night, then claiming eternal ownership, since all time is made of day and night. This whimsical story echoes the way Newgrange grants eternal life, through rebirth of the sun, to those within. Local people in medieval times knew the mound was special. They called it Cid in Broga, a fairy dwelling. In Spain, Christian monks likewise repurposed dolmens as holy sites, or warned they were haunted by spirits. Through all the cultural changes, these monuments have never lost their aura of otherworldliness. Ultimately, Dolmen de Soto and Newgrange stand as testament to the ingenuity of Europe's late Stone Age peoples. They aligned stone and earth to the rhythms of the sun, merging architecture, art, and astronomy in one grand statement. When you stand inside these chambers at the pivotal moments, equinox or solstice dawn, you feel a direct connection across 5,000 years to their builders. The careful alignments speak of hope and trust. Hope that the sun's light would return to bless the community. Trust in an ordered cosmos that the people sought to integrate into their sacred spaces. These monuments encourage us to reconsider prehistoric primitive people. Clearly, they were capable of profound vision and complex project management. Their legacy lingers every time sunlight streams down a long stone corridor to touch a patterned stone, and we gasp at the realization that ancient people, without metal or math as we know it, understood the turning of the earth and sky so well, and expressed it in enduring stone. Serpent Mound. On a gentle plateau above Ohio's Brush Creek, in a clearing surrounded by woods, a strange embankment winds across the land like a giant snake. This is the Great Serpent Mound, the largest surviving effigy earthwork in the world. The serpent stretches approximately 400 meters, 1,348 feet, in length, from a tightly coiled spiral tail at one end to an open-mouthed head at the other. Just in front of the head is an oval mound, interpreted by many as an egg the serpent is about to swallow, or perhaps as the serpent's eye, or a frog it's about to devour. The earthen embankment that forms the serpent's body is about 1.3 meters, 4 feet high, and 6 to 7 meters, 20 feet wide. The entire effigy is best appreciated from above, first truly surveyed in the 1840s, and first photographed from the air in the 1930s. On the ground, one perceives it only in segments. From a tower or drone, the full elegant design emerges. Who built Serpent Mound and when? For many years, historians attributed it to the Adena culture, circa 800 BCE to 100 CE, whose burial mounds dot the Ohio Valley. There are Adena conical mounds near the serpent. In the late 20th century, however, charcoal from one of the serpent's coils was radiocarbon dated to at about 1070 CE, suggesting it was actually the work of the Fort Ancient culture, a mound-building society that thrived a millennium after Adena. That date is interestingly coincident with Halley's Comet, 1066 CE, and the 1054 supernova that created the Crab Nebula, two spectacular sky events. Some researchers have speculated that Serpent Mound might represent or commemorate a cosmic event like a comet. The bright oval could be a comet's head, and the tail, the trailing debris. This idea is speculative but adds another layer to consider. The builders of Serpent Mound may have been keen sky watchers. What we do know is that Serpent Mound is carefully aligned to the heavens. The serpent's head points to the spot on the horizon, where the sun sets on the summer solstice. The coils and tail also appear to align with sunrises or sunsets of the solstices and equinoxes, and perhaps lunar extremes. If these alignments are intentional, Serpent Mound was not just a ceremonial effigy, but also an astronomical marker, enabling the culture to track the changing seasons and perhaps the 18.6-year lunar standstill cycle. Such knowledge would have had practical value, calendrical, and spiritual value. In terms of purpose, the serpent likely had a ceremonial and symbolic function. Many Native American tribes of the eastern woodlands revered the Great Serpent as a powerful earth and underworld spirit. Shawnee legends, for example, speak of a great horned serpent who lived in the rivers and challenged the thunderbird spirits of the sky. The act of building a massive serpent-shaped mound could have been a form of worship or a petition for balance between heavenly and chthonic forces. The oval at the head might represent a sun disk or egg, symbols of life, rebirth, or the sun itself. If the serpent is devouring an egg or sun, it could symbolize eclipse-like events or the cycle of day and night, serpent swallowing the sun at dusk. Some have even suggested the serpent could be a kind of map, a sinuous pathway guiding souls or referencing the Milky Way, path of souls in some native cosmologies. The serpent's conception and construction show impressive social organization. It would have required dozens of workers to carry and pile baskets of earth to shape this giant effigy over what may have taken years of effort, all without a centralized state, indicating the importance of the project to the community that built it. We find no burials inside the serpent itself. It's not a tomb, which is unusual because many mounds in the region were burial sites. This underscores that Serpent Mound's function was likely ceremonial to observational rather than funerary. It may have been a gathering site for seasonal festivals and rites. Archaeologists found remnants of campfires and ritual deposits nearby. For instance, small stone platforms with charcoal and stones that might have been used for offerings or feasting. European Americans encountered Serpent Mound by the early 19th century and were mystified. It didn't fit their limited understanding of native cultures, who by then were not building such earthworks. In the 1800s, many attributed it to a lost race of mound builders, separate from Native Americans, a misconception that was later dispelled. The incredulity was such that some early writers speculated on connections to Old World civilizations, comparing it to Asian dragon motifs or Celtic snake worship. Today we recognize the Fort Ancient and Adena peoples as the true builders of Ohio's mounds, but Serpent Mound still stands out as uniquely imaginative. Visiting Serpent Mound is a peaceful yet eerie experience. You can stroll along a footpath that traces the serpent's curves. You walk the length of its coiled body, essentially walking the outline of an ancient glyph. At ground level, the shape isn't obvious. You see rolling earth and only recognize sections of the serpent. Climbing a modern observation tower at the site, however, suddenly the whole design snaps into view, and it is breathtaking. The gigantic snake undulates in perfect proportion. This intentional large picture concept, creating art only fully visible from above, speaks to a sophisticated vision, though they may have planned it from a nearby hillside or with simple surveying methods, not necessarily thinking of a bird's eye view as we do. In the end, Serpent Mound remains one of North America's great archaeological enigmas. The meaning of the effigy is still debated. Perhaps it was a shrine to the earth serpent spirit, ensuring fertility and harmony. Perhaps it was a calendar in the form of a cosmic serpent. Perhaps both ideas merge, time and cycles represented by the serpent swallowing the sun each day, releasing it each morning, an eternal cycle of death and rebirth. We may never know the full story, yet Serpent Mound has an undeniable power. Over 900 years after its creation, or even longer if Adena began it, the Great Serpent continues its silent watch. It invites each generation to bring their own imagination and respect, to ponder the ancient mind that conceived a mega serpent of Earth, and to feel the landscape speak through this winding form. Some mysteries, Serpent Mound seems to say, are eternal, destined to inspire and intrigue for as long as there are curious eyes to see the serpent in the earth. Al-Nazla Rock Formation. In the oasis of Taima, an ancient caravan stop in the Arabian desert, stands a rock so uncanny it could be mistaken for a work of art. Al-Nazla is a sandstone megalith about 6 meters high and 9 meters wide, perched on twin natural pedestals. What makes it extraordinary is that it is split cleanly in two. A near-perfect vertical crack divides the boulder into two halves of almost equal size. The gap between them is only a few centimeters. The two pieces look like they were sliced by a gigantic laser or saw. The surfaces of the cut are flat and smooth, aligned like mirror images. To stand before it is to do a double take. Nature rarely produces such straight lines. On the rock's southeast face are several petroglyphs, ancient carvings pecked into the stone, depicting a camel, a horse, and human figures. These carvings are thousands of years old. Tama has been inhabited since at least 1200 BCE and was a famous oasis on trade routes. The presence of the petroglyphs tells us that ancient people noticed Al-Nazla and perhaps venerated it or used it as a landmark. One can imagine weary traders and pilgrims pausing at this striking split rock, spinning tales about how it came to be. The true cause of Al-Nazla's split is likely geological. Geologists note that the rock sits on a fault or joint in the bedrock. Possibly at some time in the distant past, tectonic forces caused the rock to fracture along a perfectly vertical plane. The sandstone of the region often has regular jointing. Over centuries, wind erosion could have blown sand into the crack, gradually abrading and widening it to the width we see today. Another factor could be slight ground movement. Notice that one of the two support pedestals is smaller. If that pedestal shifted even a little, it could have helped crack the boulder along that fault line. The end result is that Al-Nazla looks as if it were surgically split with barely any displacement of the two halves. It's a wonderful coincidence of nature that leaves a very man-made seeming result. However, local folklore and many visitors prefer more fantastical explanations. One tale says, a legendary king split the rock with a divine sword to prove his power. Another says, the prophet Moses passed by Tama and, with a strike of his staff, cleaved the rock to draw water, echoing the biblical story of Moses striking a rock at Horeb. More commonly, people whisper that it's the work of jinn, the invisible spirits of Arabian lore, known to slice or move things with supernatural force. In modern times, as Al-Nazla's photo has spread on the internet, it has inspired wild theories that it's evidence of an ancient advanced civilization with giant cutting machines, or even an alien intervention. These ideas are not taken seriously by scientists, but they underscore how unique Al-Nazla appears. Visiting Al-Nazla is a delight for photographers. The contrast of the warm brown rock against the blue sky, bisected by that razor-thin shadow line, is surreal. As the late afternoon sun slants through the narrow cleft, it creates a beam of light that seems almost tangible. Standing between the halves, one can look through the crack at the desert beyond, as if peering through a doorway. It's easy to see why some think it was deliberately made. It has the feel of a desert sculpture, yet, in all likelihood, this is a natural artifact, a testament to the often underappreciated precision of natural forces. The wind can sandblast rock faces to smooth perfection. Gravity can split a balanced boulder neatly given the right stress points. Al-Nazla reminds us of something profound, that nature and human craftsmanship can sometimes converge in appearance. Just as we see faces in natural rock formations, the phenomenon of pareidolia, here we see a cut where none was made by us. It's a humbling formation, blurring the line between the natural and the artificial. No wonder ancient travelers felt it was a place of power. Even today, whether one attributes it to simple geology or the playful hand of jinn, Al-Nazla leaves us with a sense of wonder. It stands alone in the silence of the desert, balanced and mysterious, a prompt for our imagination and a beautiful demonstration of the surprising order that can arise in nature's chaos. Ishino Hoden and Masuda no Iwaune, hidden in the verdant hills and rice fields of Japan, are two ancient megaliths that defy easy explanation. The first, Ishino Hoden, sometimes called the Floating Stone, is located in Takasago, Hyogo Prefecture. It is an enormous block of granite, about 6.5 meters long, 5.7 meters wide, and 5.5 meters high, partially detached from the surrounding bedrock. It sits balanced on a narrow central support, surrounded by a pond of water that conceals the base, creating the illusion that this 500-ton stone hovers above the ground. The monolith's surfaces are astonishingly smooth and flat, meeting at precise right angles. It is as if a giant cuboid was carefully carved out of the mountain and almost completely undercut. On top of Ishino Hoden, there are shallow rectangular depressions, as though the stone were meant to slot into some larger structure, or perhaps to balance another monolith, earning it the nickname, the stone that floats rocks, as it wiggles slightly on its pedestal. No one knows who carved Ishino Hoden or why. It is not mentioned in any records, its age is uncertain, but some guess it could date to Japan's Kofun or Asuka periods, 3rd to 7th centuries CE, or even earlier. The site has been sacred for as long as local memory goes. Nearby stands a Shinto shrine, and the stone itself, partly surrounded by a fence, is venerated as a dwelling of the gods. According to legend, the gods themselves lowered Ishino Hoden from the heavens and set it to rest upon the earth. Another local myth claims that two feuding gods, or giants, carved it in one night, shaping it until it floated to impress a goddess. Such tales convey the awe the stone inspires. It truly looks like something not of this world. Even modern engineers marvel at how perfectly balanced the huge rock is on such a small contact point. The second enigmatic monolith is in Asuka, an area of Nara Prefecture famous for unusual stoneworks. Called Masuda no Iwaune, rock ship of Masuda, it is a massive solid granite boulder measuring roughly 11 meters by 8 meters by 4.5 meters and weighing an estimated 800 tons. It sits on a hillside overlooking the village of Masuda. What makes Masuda no Iwaune peculiar, beyond its sheer size, are the modifications made to it. The top is flattened into a slight slope bearing two large rectangular holes, each about 1 meter deep, and the sides have symmetrical notches, as if to hold beams or to provide footholds. The entire thing looks like some sort of giant stone vessel or platform, hence the name rock ship. It's as if the builders started to create a huge tomb or foundation, and then abruptly stopped, leaving this giant carved boulder in situ. Masuda no Iwaune's purpose is even murkier than Ishino Hoden's. The Asuka region was the cradle of the Yamato state, Japan's first imperial government, in the 6th to 7th centuries CE, and it is dotted with unusual stone monuments such as tomb mounds and carved stone turtles and monkeys. However, no record mentions Masuda no Iwaune. Some speculate it was meant to be the base of a tomb for an early ruler. Perhaps an emperor's burial chamber was planned inside that rock or under it, and the twin pits on top were for anchoring a now-vanished structure or capstone. Others think it might have been part of an ancient astronomical observatory, though the pits don't clearly align to any celestial pattern now. Another hypothesis, it's a cenotaph, or ceremonial altar related to water. A local legend calls it the rock ship that would ferry souls or gods. The lack of debris around it, no piles of chiseled stone pieces, is odd. Where did the rock removed to form the pits and flatten the top go? It's possible that Masuda no Iwaune was carved somewhere else and somehow transported here, which would truly stretch our understanding of Asuka period technology. Local folklore doesn't provide clear answers either, but it hints at extraordinary happenings. Asuka is rich with mythology. One story in the area speaks of heavenly beings, Tenno, who arrived from beyond the sea and taught people knowledge, then departed suddenly, leaving their works half-finished when a great disaster, some say a flood, struck. Could Masuda no Iwaune be one of those abruptly halted works? It's fanciful, but the stone does give the impression of an abandoned project. Another tale associates the Masuda ship with local water spirits, suggesting it was a sort of offering to ensure the village's lakes and wells never ran dry. These Japanese megaliths challenge conventional history because they don't fit neatly into the archaeological record. Japan's early centuries, Kofun period, saw large earthen burial mounds, kofun, and some stonework, but nothing on this monolithic scale in known official projects. If these were imperial or religious undertakings, why were they not recorded? One possibility is that they date to an earlier forgotten culture, though mainstream archaeologists generally disagree and tentatively date them to the 6th to 7th century. Another possibility, they were indeed imperial, but were failures. Scrapped projects not worth mentioning, repurposed later for local myth. We simply don't have enough evidence to say. Visiting these sites today is striking. At Ishino Hoden, you gaze at the giant floating cube and genuinely feel like you're in the presence of something supernatural. It's that mind-bending. You can walk around it on a little boardwalk. The water prevents direct access, and from each angle it looks equally impossible. At Masuda no Iwaune, you can actually climb onto the big rock. There are modern steps now. Standing on its flat top, peering into the twin rectangular pits carved out, one can ponder what the ancient masons intended. The panoramic view of the Asuka countryside from up there is beautiful and thought-provoking. Did those who carved this rock choose the spot for a reason, perhaps aligning it with something in the landscape or sky? In the absence of firm answers, Ishino Hoden and Masuda no Iwaune leave us with tantalizing possibilities. They force us to admit that even a country as well documented as Japan harbors megalithic mysteries on par with those of other ancient lands. We may compare them to, say, the unfinished obelisk in Egypt's Aswan quarry, or the many Moai left in Rano Raraku on Easter Island, monuments in mid-creation, telling a story of sudden abandonment. Ultimately, these stones keep their secrets. They provoke speculation. Some locals even half-joke about alien involvement. After all, Tenno coming from the sky sounds like extraterrestrials in modern lore. But speculation aside, what they truly represent is the bold capacity of humans, or human-like forces in legend, to attempt great things. They stand as Japan's most enigmatic contribution to the world's catalog of ancient wonders, enduring proof that even in the heart of a well-known civilization, there are chapters of the past that remain unread. Silustani's Chulpas. On a windswept plateau 4,000 meters above sea level in the Peruvian Andes, overlooking the shimmering waters of Lake Umayo, stand the Chulpas of Silustani, dozens of towering stone cylinders that hold the secrets of a lost people. These funerary towers were built by the Kula culture, a pre-Inca civilization between the 12th and 15th centuries CE, and later utilized by the expanding Inca Empire. The Chulpas of Silustani are both haunting and beautiful. The tallest reach about 12 meters, 40 feet in height. Their solid stone, drum-shaped walls rising above the altiplano, as if defying the passage of time. Each chulpa is constructed from finely cut blocks of volcanic stone, tuff or andesite, laid without mortar, their exterior slightly wider at the top than at the bottom, an inverted cone or tub shape that gives them a bold profile. Some towers are relatively plain, while others feature decorative friezes and relief carvings. One famous chulpa, for example, has a band of carved lizards running across it, symbolizing regeneration, since lizards can regrow tails. Many chulpas also have small, square doors near their base, invariably facing the east. The eastward orientation was deliberate. The sunrise was associated with rebirth, and the rays of the rising sun were meant to enter the door and spiritually feed the deceased inside. The chulpas functioned as above-ground mausoleums. Inside each, the mummified bodies of nobles or extended family members were kept in a fetal position, often accompanied by riches like gold, silver, pottery, textiles, and food offerings for the afterlife. Essentially, these towers were like family tombs for the elite, where ancestors' remains were honored and consulted. Silustani's builders displayed masterful masonry. Some chulpas use massive blocks with perfectly fitted joints, a style the Inca later adopted and enhanced when they took over. Indeed, a few chulpas show Inca-style stonework, indicating they were finished or modified by Inca masons. The inverted trapezoidal form of the towers not only looks imposing, but also helped them withstand earthquakes for centuries. The sophistication here rivals Inca architecture, which is remarkable considering the Kula were a regional kingdom, not as vast or resource-rich as the Inca state. It speaks to a cultural devotion to honoring the dead. Tremendous effort was invested in creating these lasting monuments. Local legends, collected in later times, say these towers were built by Gentiles, a race of giants who lived before the Inca. One oft-told story is that when the first Inca entered the region, the Gentiles were struck by a catastrophe, sometimes described as fire from the sky or a flood, which wiped them out, leaving only their stone towers behind. Another legend claims that one chulpa, the lightning tower, was split apart by a thunderbolt because its builders angered the gods. Indeed, there is a tower at Silustani that appears cracked open, as if by an explosion, with scorch marks on the interior. It's tempting to connect that to the fall of the Kula, perhaps a hint that the Inca, with their muskets or lightning superstition, attacked, or it could be mythic embellishment. Either way, Andean people in the post-conquest period clearly regarded these towers with awe. Some even believed treasure lay hidden in them, and sadly, many chulpas were dynamited or looted by Spanish treasure hunters in the colonial era, who found mummies and grave goods. This not only scattered the ancestors' remains, but robbed us of knowledge. Much of what was placed inside is lost or in museums, making it hard to piece together the full burial rituals. Archaeologically, Silustani reveals a high level of societal organization and ritual practice. The site, on a peninsula jutting into Lake Umayo, may have been chosen for its natural beauty and defensibility. It's a place where land and water meet under a vast sky, a fitting backdrop for monuments concerning life, death, and renewal. Researchers believe only high-ranking clans had chulpas. Commoners likely buried their dead in simpler graves. The existence of over 80 chulpas at Silustani and others in surrounding regions indicates that the Kola nobility had a custom of visible, competitive commemoration. Each clan chief wanted a taller or more elaborate tower to showcase his lineage's importance. This parallels other ancient cultures, like Maya temple pyramids or medieval European crypts. A universal impulse to immortalize one's lineage in stone. When you visit Silustani today, you walk a slight slope and suddenly find yourself among these great stone cylinders overlooking a glittering lake with vicuñas, wild Andean camelids, grazing between them. The setting sun casts long shadows of the chulpas onto the ground. It's not hard to feel the poignancy of the place. These towers, built to grant eternal life through memory to a few, have outlasted the culture that built them. Empires fell, languages changed, the Kola spoke Aymara, Incas imposed Quechua, then came Spanish, but the silent chulpas still stand. They symbolize continuity amidst upheaval. As the sun's rays catch the eastern doors of the towers one last time before night, you can imagine the Kola people assembled here in reverence, perhaps in the early morning after the longest night, waiting for sunlight to pierce the door, a sign that the ancestors received it. The spiritual continuity in Andean culture is strong. Even today, Andean communities maintain a belief in feeding and caring for the souls of the dead. Silustani's chulpas are a grand physical manifestation of that belief. Stone homes for the departed, designed so that sunrise, rebirth, could reach in and energize them daily. In their architecture is a message of hope, that death is not final, that with the coming of each dawn, there is renewal. In their silent vigil, the chulpas remind us that while death was central to their design, so was the promise of rebirth. They stand like sentinels guarding the high lake, bridging earth and sky, the living and the dead. And as long as they stand, the story of the Kola, their reverence for ancestors and genius in stone, also endures, inviting us to marvel and remember. Rajim Elhiri. On the open basalt plains of the Golan Heights, in a land touched by biblical history, lies a prehistoric monument so perplexing it's been nicknamed the Stonehenge of the Levant. Locally known in Arabic as Rajim Elhiri, stone heap of the wild cat, and in Hebrew as Gilgal Rephaim, wheel of the giants, it consists of an enormous circular stone structure that is visible only from the air or a high vantage. It comprises 5 concentric rings of piled volcanic rocks, the largest circle about 150 meters, 490 feet, in diameter and originally over 2 meters high. In the middle of the rings is a massive central cairn or tumulus, about 20 to 25 meters across and 5 meters tall, built of smaller stones. In all, over 42,000 tons of basalt were used to create this structure, truly a gargantuan effort for its time. Pottery shards found in the fill suggest Rajim Elhiri was built in the early Bronze Age 2 or 3, around 3000 to 2700 BCE, making it roughly contemporary with the pyramids of Egypt and Stonehenge. Unlike those, however, Rajim Elhiri remained unknown to the outside world until modern times. It was identified by archaeologists only after Israel captured the Golan Heights in 1967. Local semi-nomadic Bedouin knew of it, but didn't suspect its scale due to its low profile. Its name, Wheel of the Giants, comes from a biblical term, Rephaim, a race of giants mentioned in the Bible that were said to inhabit the region in antiquity. The Hebrew name thus hints that even local tradition associated the site with giants or mighty ancient beings. What was its purpose? No one knows for sure, but several theories exist. The central cairn was initially thought to be a tomb, much like a barrow in Europe. However, when it was excavated in the 1980s, no burial chamber was found. The cairn was solid, and at the center beneath it was a small empty cave-like space, perhaps looted in antiquity, or perhaps never a tomb at all. If it was a tomb, it was unlike any other in the Levant, monumentally large and communal, with far more stones than needed to cover a single body. It's possible the central cairn could have held a now decayed wooden structure, or a sarcophagus that left no trace, but it's puzzling. Another possibility is astronomical/ceremonial usage. The entrance, there is one gap acting like a gateway in the outer ring on the northeast side, aligns with the point of sunrise on the summer solstice, and an opposite opening aligns with the sunset of that day. Some researchers claim certain smaller gaps in the ringings correspond to equinox sunrise or specific bright stars rising points around 3000 BCE. For example, the brightest star Sirius. If true, Rajim Elhiri could have served as a calendar or a ritual space for marking important times of year. The numerous stone rings, and possibly a now vanished trench of water that might have surrounded it, according to some interpretations, bring to mind a cosmic model, perhaps representing the wheel of time or the eye of a deity. Local legends, collected from Druze and Bedouin lore, don't have clear stories about the site beyond haunted associations. The Druze often attribute mysterious ancient structures to jinn, or pre-Adamite spirits. One Druze tale does say this, that before the time of Moses, a great congregation of wise men from across the world met at a wheel of stones in the Bashan, Golan, to share knowledge. But the gods were angered by their ambition and scattered them with a sound like thunder. It's an oddly Tower of Babel-like story. While it's pure legend, it poetically suggests Rajim Elhiri was a place of gathering and maybe of knowledge exchange. To construct this monument must have required an organized society. The people of early Bronze 2 to 3 in the southern Levant were the region's first city builders, in places like Ebla and early Canaanite towns. The Golan then was more pastoral, but Rajim Elhiri shows they could mobilize labor on a big scale. Tens of thousands of stones had to be gathered, likely from surrounding field clearance or deliberately quarried from surface basalt flows, and piled according to a preconceived plan. The rings are fairly precise circles, an impressive engineering feat likely achieved by staking a center point and using ropes to measure out radial distances, the same way Stonehenge's ditches were made circular. So, whoever built it had a sense of large-scale geometry. Standing at the center cairn today, you are below the height of the surrounding rings, which are now partly collapsed. At ground level, you mostly see heaps of rock around you and the sky above, a bit like being in a maze of low walls. Climb an outer ring or view via drone, and the pattern leaps out, 5 concentric circles, almost perfectly circular. That duality of experience, patterned from above, chaotic from inside, might be intentional, perhaps restricting full comprehension to a vantage point, like a nearby hill, where a leader or priest might have stood to observe ceremonies within the rings. We can sense that Rajim Elhiri had some communal sacred purpose. It may not be as visually arresting as Stonehenge, since it's built of unshaped rocks only a meter or 2 high, but its scale is actually larger in diameter. One theory is that it was a sky burial site. Bodies might have been laid on the central cairn for vultures to consume, a practice known in some ancient Middle Eastern cultures, after which bones were interred elsewhere. If true, the rings could have kept predators out and perhaps delineated stages of a funerary ritual, the mourners standing in different rings by status, etc. It's speculation, but excavation did find many vulture and other bird bones on site, suggestive when combined with the sky burial idea. Whatever its function, Rajim Elhiri stands as a grand prehistoric achievement and an enduring mystery. Israeli archaeologists often simply call it Galgal Rephaim, the Wheel of the Ghosts giants, tacitly acknowledging we're not sure who built it or why. It got a boost in popular imagination when it featured, as a location, in a biblical-themed mystery novel, and sometimes it's roped into Atlantis or ancient lost civilizations theories. But on its own terms, it tells us that around 5,000 years ago, on the Golan Heights, a society with no written language and simple tools managed to create a precise, monumental assembly of stones. A design only fully appreciable from above, perhaps for the eyes of their gods. Great flood theories. As we conclude our journey through these ancient sites, a recurrent theme whispers through many of them and their legends. The memory of a great flood. Nearly every culture carries a tale of a world-drowning deluge that wiped out a former age and spared only a few survivors. From Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical Noah, to the Maya Popol Vuh and Aboriginal Australian stories of the Great Waters, the flood myth is ubiquitous. Could these myths be reflecting real events at the end of the last ice age? Modern science suggests, yes, possibly. Around 12,000 years ago, as the ice age waned, the climate flipped violently, a period called the Younger Dryas. Ice caps melted rapidly thereafter, causing sea levels to rise more than 120 meters over the next millennia. This wasn't a smooth rise. It occurred in pulses, sometimes with catastrophic rapidity. Coastal areas that had been home to generations were swallowed by the oceans. Scientific studies indicate that around 6,200 BCE, for example, a sudden release of glacial meltwater caused the Mediterranean to breach the Bosporus Strait and flood the Black Sea Basin, an event that may echo in Near Eastern flood legends. Similarly, around 7,600 BCE, a massive ancient glacial lake in North America, Lake Agassiz, drained abruptly, raising global sea levels and perhaps causing extreme floods worldwide. These memories could well be preserved in cultural myths of deluges. Intriguingly, underwater archaeology has begun finding evidence of lost coastal settlements. Off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island, divers discovered what appeared to be submerged stone structures, possibly an Ice Age-era ceremonial center, now under the sea. Likewise, in India's Gulf of Khambhat, Cambay, near the modern city of Dwarka, sonar and dredging revealed ruins of what might be an ancient city on the seabed. These findings bolster the notion that thriving human communities were drowned and lost to history, real events that could lie behind our flood myths. Some authors even speculate that an advanced coastal civilization, the fabled Atlantis by one name, was lost to these rising seas, and that survivors carried forward knowledge which jump-started new societies inland, possibly explaining sudden advancements like the dawn of agriculture, or sites like Göbekli Tepe appearing almost out of nowhere. Mainstream science remains cautious about such sweeping claims, noting that parallel evolution and exchange can also account for shared techniques. Yet the parallels we've noted across distant cultures, from pyramid building to serpent worship to precision stone masonry, do raise the question, are they simply coincidental? Or could they be vestiges of a much older, interconnected world? One striking observation is the recurrence of certain symbols and engineering feats across far-flung regions. We saw, for instance, the serpent motif at Göbekli Tepe reappear in the effigy of Serpent Mound in Ohio. Stylized sun discs and birds carved in Bronze Age Europe and the Near East find echoes in Mesoamerican iconography. Even the mysterious handbag symbol, depicted in Göbekli Tepe pillars and later in Assyrian and Mayan art, transcends continents. Such global echoes could indeed result from independent invention. Humans respond to the same sun, stars, animals. But they might also hint at knowledge sharing in deep antiquity. It's an enticing possibility that early human civilizations, though separated by oceans, were not wholly isolated as we assume, or perhaps that a now-lost progenitor culture seeded ideas far and wide. Perhaps the Great Flood myth is both fact and metaphor. Fact in that the memory of the dramatic post-Ice Age sea rise and associated disasters lingered in human storytelling. Metaphor in that it represents any great collapse or reset that humanity faced. Flood myths often describe not just water, but moral decline, a purification, and then a fresh start for the world. They speak to a collective memory of vulnerability and resilience. Civilizations are fragile, but also resilient. The flood comes, whether literal water, or war, or famine, and the human story almost ends. Yet, invariably, a remnant survives, carrying the torch of memory, of skills, of culture, into the new world. Looking back at the sites we've visited, many can be seen through the lens of flood or cataclysm. Göbekli Tepe's construction, shortly after the end of the Ice Age, and deliberate burial hint at a society responding to drastic change, conceivably even a flood or climate upheaval. Balbek's titanic stones, some folklore says, were laid by survivors of a flood. They credit Cain or giants, figures from before the biblical deluge. Silustani's towers speak of preserving the elite after death, literally elevating them above the ground, almost defying any disaster that might erode the earth below. It's intriguing that many megaliths are on high ground. The Giza pyramids on a plateau, Machu Picchu high in the Andes, Sacsayhuaman on a hill, Serpent Mound on a ridge, Newgrange on a rise. One might whimsically wonder if those who built on heights had ancestral memory, that higher ground is safer. As we conclude, consider this final scene. Picture one of these ancient sites at the break of dawn. The long shadow of night recedes, and sunlight strikes the standing stones or gilds the mountaintop city. At Göbekli Tepe, imagine priests watching the first sun rays hit their carved pillars. At Stonehenge, the heel stone catches the midsummer sun. At Newgrange, a beam creeps down the passage to the tomb's heart. In those moments, hope is renewed. The world, whatever befell it, be it flood or darkness, is born again with the light. The voices of our ancestors murmur through these stones and earthworks. They urge us to remember their lessons, to respect the natural forces, the gods of flood and thunder, and to value the knowledge that helped them survive. They also inspire us with their ingenuity, their artistry, their ability to rebuild. If a great flood, literal or figurative, were to strike our world, we too would rely on our shared memory, science, and spirit to endure and start anew. In a sense, the ancient sites we've explored are messages in a bottle, left by a resilient humanity for the future. The stones remain, and through them, the voices of our ancestors still speak, telling us of great floods and fires, of builders and dreamers, of caution and continuity. It falls to us to listen, to decode the wisdom in those whispers, and to keep the flame of memory alive, so that the great flood of time does not wash our story away, and so that, if we ever face our own deluge, we will find a way to ride the waters and carry on the human saga.